Hi, my name is Joe Tamburino, and today we're going to talk about body-worn camera video. That's the video from police officers' body-worn cameras. What are the rules pertaining to their becoming public, and specifically what happened in the Amir Locke case? Amir Locke was the young man who was shot on February 2nd, 2022 in an apartment in downtown Minneapolis. Now, we all know basically what happened in that situation, and we know that a couple of weeks ago, the Attorney General and the Hennepin County Attorney released the videos of all the body-worn cameras from that situation. For 2 months, the only video we had was what the authorities released, which was that one video that didn't show the beginning of this scenario. And it would have been very helpful to the public, and it would have been the public's right to know what actually happened. So before we get into basically the nitty-gritty of what happened in those body-worn cameras and how they were eventually released, let's go through what a body-worn camera is and what are the rules pertaining to it. Well, a body-worn camera is basically a small device that police officers wear basically in the middle of their chest. And they turn them on and off just with a couple of taps. And they record everything that's going on in front of the officer, audio and video. And those videos are stored and they become what's called investigative material. And investigative material in Minnesota is governed by what's called the Minnesota Data Practices Act. Now that's a law, a state law, that says whenever you have a criminal investigation, all data obtained by the government, whether it's a police officer, investigator, or some other government agent, becomes investigative material and it's confidential. Can't be released to the public unless two things happen. Number one, the person who's being investigated never gets charged. In fact, the prosecutors say declines to charge them. Well, that's the end of the case, and then all of that material may be released. Or number two, the person, the subject of the investigation, does get charged, and he or she either is found not guilty, or the case is dismissed, or is found guilty, meaning they're convicted, and the case is over. So after the case is over, whether it's no charges, or there's a charge and then a conviction or a dismissal or not guilty, then the material can be released. And body-worn camera videos, part of that material. Now, there is an exception in the law with body-worn cameras and other investigative material, and that's this, that during an investigation, if law enforcement, usually in conjunction with prosecutor's office or political leaders, decide that some of that material should be released in order to dispel widespread rumor or prevent unrest, or to aid in a criminal investigation, they could release the information themselves. And sometimes you see that happen. About 2 years ago, if you recall, it was the summer of 2020, an individual shot himself on Nicollet Mall in downtown Minneapolis. The individual was black. And after he shot himself, through social media, there were widespread rumors that the police had shot him. Now, then Chief Medaria Arredondo decided to dispel those rumors and released police videos that were obtained from street cameras where this individual shot himself. And it worked. What happened is, within hours after this person committed suicide, then Chief Arredondo released the video, and it was quite clear that a police officer didn't shoot this individual, rather he committed suicide and shot himself. And that's an example of when an authority decides to release investigative material while the case is going on so that they could dispense with any type of widespread rumors. Now let's focus on the Amir Locke situation. Now, we know that Amir Locke was an individual who was staying in an apartment in the Bolero Flats, which is a large apartment building in the southern part of downtown Minneapolis. He was not the subject of any type of search warrant, and the police didn't know that he was going to be in this apartment. The Minneapolis police were assisting the St. Paul police in a murder investigation. Someone was gunned down in January of this year in St. Paul, and the police investigation in St. Paul led them to certain spots in Minneapolis, particularly 3 apartments in Bolero Flats. So the St. Paul Police Department enlisted the help of the Minneapolis Police Department. The Minneapolis Police Department took all of that information and went to a judge in Hennepin County, Judge Peter Cahill, and obtained what's called a no-knock search warrant. That's a search warrant where the police can simply enter the residence, whether it's a house, apartment, condo, it doesn't matter, without knocking or announcing their presence. Judge Cahill, who you may recall is the presiding judge on the Chauvin trial that occurred last year, and is the presiding judge on the Chauvin co-defendants and their trials coming up in June of this year, he gave the police the authority to execute a no-knock search warrant. Now, on February 2nd of this year, which was a Wednesday, at approximately 6:30, 7 a.m., early in the morning, the police went to Bolero Flats, and they had what's called a universal key for all the apartments, a general key. That's quite common in the cities. When you have big apartment buildings, many times the building's owner will give local law enforcement and first responders a general key that could be used in any of the apartments. This way, first responders could respond to an emergency very quickly. So the police had a key to this particular apartment, and instead of executing the search warrant in a no-knock fashion, meaning they just opened the door, didn't announce anything, and came in, rather, they decided to do it in a knock fashion. So, with the key, they opened the door, and as soon as they opened the door, they started yelling and announcing their presence and telling whoever was inside to raise your hands, show your hands, police, search warrant.
Police search warrant! Police search warrant!
Now, within 24 hours of the search warrant where Amir Locke was staying in, that apartment, the Minneapolis Police Department, through some authority, released one body-worn camera video. It was the video of the police officer who opened the door and wound up being the fourth officer who went inside of the apartment. Now, this video was displayed all over media within 24 hours of the shooting, but it didn't quite show everything. This fourth officer who went in, most of it, of what he saw in front of him, was obscured because there were officers blocking his view to Amir Locke, who was sleeping on the couch. However, as he enters, you will see, as we all saw in media, like the Star Tribune had it on their website, you see Amir Locke coming out from under the blankets on the side of the couch. So I want to show you this video, which was displayed with the Star Tribune and other media outlets. Now, this is Officer Pearson's video. And what you will see in this video is the following: that the officer opens the door, unlocks the door, and all of the officers go in. Now, what you saw there was the officers going in, but from this officer's vantage point, you can't really see Amir Locke at the beginning because there are officers in front of this particular officer. But within a few seconds of entering the apartment, you do see Amir Locke on the side of the couch come out from some blankets with a gun in his hand, and obviously at that time he's shot by Officer Hanneman. Now, when this was originally broadcast on February 3rd, a day after the shooting, it left a lot of people questioning about what exactly happened, because the narrative soon became that Amir Locke was fast asleep in a deep slumber, and when the police entered, he was simply roused by them and on the side of the couch poked his head up from under the covers with a gun in his hand. And so the narrative became that he was completely asleep, happened to have a gun in his hand, and when the police were there, they basically startled him, and he came up from under the blankets with a gun in his hand, and unfortunately and tragically, he was shot. So it left a lot of people wondering, well, why was this so? Why didn't the police try to wake him up first? What was going on? And unfortunately, it gave many people a lot of questions and concerns, once again, about the Minneapolis Police Department. But then what happened? Well, it was only a couple of weeks ago that there was a press conference by Attorney General Keith Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman. And at that press conference, they announced that there will be no charges against the officer who shot Mr. Locke because they found that the officer's actions were reasonable, meaning that it was an authorized use of force in this situation. And then a few days after that press conference, they released all of the other body-worn camera videos. and we saw something completely different than what we saw in this original video. And let me show you. So let's go to actually Officer Carlson's video. This is the officer who is the second officer going into the scene. And I'll play it at live speed. I'm going to pause it in a second. Now right there, just a second into it, you see that the TV's on, and you see an individual poke their head up from the end of the couch, the part of the couch that's closest to the officers. You know the TV is on because you can see something on the TV. Later on, you don't see much of the TV only because when the police officers come into the apartment, they have bright flashlights attached to their guns. So when the flashlight illuminates the TV or puts the light directly on the TV, it basically looks like a blank screen. But at the beginning, you can see that the TV's on. And then you see this individual, who we now know as Amir Locke, poke his head up from the end of the couch, the part of the couch closest to the officers. And in fact, look at the officers.
Let me see your hands, hands.
Now what you saw there is the following. That after Amir Locke poked his head up and looked at the officers, he then turned around, put his head back under, went under the covers, the blankets, and then started moving quickly. You could see the covers going everywhere. And then he goes to the side of the couch, comes out of the covers again, only this time he has a gun. And during this whole time, the officers are yelling, hands up, show me your hands, police, search warrant. And when you read the police officers' reports that go along with the videos, you will see that what the officers say is the following, particularly Officer Carlson, that when he first enters, he sees Amir Locke poke his head up, look directly at them, and the officers are in full uniform. And then, upon seeing them, turn away and go under the covers and move about the covers as if he's trying to find something. And then, as you saw in the video, and as you would read in the reports, one of the officers, Officer Carlson, literally goes right up to Amir Locke, the couch, and starts kicking the end of the couch to get Mr. Locke to come out of the covers. Unfortunately, when he comes out of the covers the second time, he has the gun.
Please search warrant. Let me see your hands, hands.
If we look at Officer Hanneman's video, and Officer Hanneman is the shooting officer, we can see the same thing. Now, in Officer Hanneman's body-worn camera video, you can clearly see that when he goes in, he sees Amir Locke poke his head up, turn his head toward the police, and then as the police are yelling, show me your hands, he turns back around and goes under the covers and starts rustling around, and then unfortunately comes out the side with the gun in his hand, and that's when he's shot. Now, we could break this down frame by frame, which I have done, and we'll go through those frames. You can see Officer Hanneman entering the apartment. There, the TV is on. There is Amir Locke poking his head up from the end of the couch. His head is now moving from the officer's direction, then back under the blankets. Now you can see the blankets moving around. Officer Hanneman has his gun raised. Officer Hanneman goes to his right. The blankets are moving around. You can see that Amir Locke under the blankets is poking his head at the top of the blanket, and it's going quite high. And then unfortunately, at this point, he comes out again from the blankets on the side, and that's when he has his gun in his hand. And that's when the fatal shot happens. If we go frame by frame with Officer Carlson, so starting at about slide 268, you see Officer Carlson coming in. There's Amir Locke poking his head up. The TV's on. Then Amir Locke puts his head back down and starts going under the covers. You can see all of the rustling around. His hands are going to and fro. The covers are still moving. And at that point, Officer Carlson looks to his left toward a door. It was at that point that Amir Locke poked his head out from the side of the couch, and this time he had a gun. Now, the point of all this is the following. Had these other videos been released, specifically Officer Hanneman's video and Officer Carlson's video, as well as others, Officer Saseth and Pearson, you would see the full picture. You would see that Amir Locke, who again wasn't part of the search warrant and wasn't a suspect, he just happened to be there, that when the police entered, yelling their presence and saying, "Show me your hands," he comes up from the end of the couch, looks at the officers, turns away from them, goes under the covers as if he's trying to grab something, and then comes out the second time, only this time holding the gun. It would have changed the whole narrative. It would have changed everything we thought about the case. Instead of having 2 months where the public is left to speculate as to why did the police just barge in and wake this person up, what you would see is that the person either was woken up or was up at the very beginning, actually saw the officers, looked at them, turned away, went under the covers, and then eventually retrieved a gun. It would have been quite a different situation. So what does that mean? Well, what we should be thinking critically about is this: body-worn camera videos and when they get released to the public. Wouldn't it be a better situation if a body-worn camera video had to be released within a certain period of time since the offense or the incident, say 30 days, unless you had to keep these body-worn camera videos confidential in order to have to finish the investigation, or to make sure that the integrity of the investigation is not harmed, or for some other reason, like maybe there's an informant that's part of this case that needs to be protected. But in that situation, the police or the prosecutor would go to a judge and ask the judge not to release the body-worn cameras within the 30 days because it might harm the investigation. And of course, in those situations, a judge would sign that, and the body-worn camera video would not be available until the investigation is complete. But normally, at least we would have these videos, say, within 30 days of the incident, and the public would be able to see exactly what happened, which would dispel rumors and basically people making assumptions as to what happened. Also, we should be asking the authorities in this particular case 3 questions. Number 1, who made the decision to release just that one video within 24 hours of the incident? Number 2, why didn't they release other videos when they released this one video that basically didn't show anything that happened at the beginning? And number 3, who else saw these videos before they were released? Now, the third question is very important because normally the people who see these videos are in 2 camps, law enforcement and prosecutors. Of course, prosecutors and investigators must look at these videos. They must share them with colleagues, get second opinions, show investigators, go over them. That's part of the process of doing due diligence in an investigation. But you must ask if anyone else sees these videos, anyone involved in the case, civil attorneys, a victim's family or friends, or anyone else that the authorities decide to show the videos to. If that's the case, then you must wonder, why can't it be shown to the public? Because if by chance any of these videos were shown to people who are not in law enforcement or in prosecution, why did that happen? So those are the 3 questions. Who made the decision to release this one video at the beginning? Why didn't they release the other videos? And did anyone outside of law enforcement and prosecutors see any of these videos before they were released? The reason for all of this can be summed up in one word: transparency. The biggest thing to build confidence in our system is to have a transparent system. In today's world, for a number of reasons, there's a lot of skepticism about the criminal justice system and about criminal investigations. And the way we could combat that skepticism and build trust back in our government organizations is to have transparency, to show the public how the sausage is made, how things are investigated, and what the materials show. Now, of course, in situations where disclosing that would hurt the investigation, they should not be disclosed. But most of the time, that's not necessary. And most of the time, these materials can be made public. So, when you look at a case like this, and unfortunately, there's going to be other cases that are like this. Whether we like it or not, things happen. It's very unfortunate and tragic, but these things do happen. And when they happen again, we must ask these questions. Thank you.